The hidden death most men never see coming. There are men walking among us who've never been insulted to their face, never been punched, never been betrayed in some cinematic, dramatic way, and yet they are dying. Not from wounds, not from disease, but from something far quieter and far more efficient. They are dying from obedience. From the way they say "I'm fine" when they're burning inside. From the way they agree just to keep the peace. From the way they shrink themselves so no one else feels uncomfortable. And here's the brutal part. The world applauds them for it. They call it maturity. They call it wisdom. They call it peace. But it's not peace. Peace without boundaries is just a beautiful cage. And wisdom without power, that's just permission to be ignored. These men weren't born this way. They were trained from childhood. They were told, be nice, don't make a scene, don't upset anyone. So they learned to smile when they were uncomfortable, to forgive what never deserved forgiveness, to wait patiently to be chosen, and to believe that this was kindness. But it wasn't kindness. It was emotional captivity. And if you've been living this way, you already know the feeling. The slow erasure of yourself. The world doesn't notice it happening because the performance is flawless. You comfort others while you bleed quietly. You make them feel seen, even when you feel invisible. And one day, you wake up realizing that you've traded your fire for silence, your truth for tolerance, your boundaries for applause. Machiavelli never taught men to be liked. He taught them to be feared when necessary, but above all to be respected by design. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you want to be free, you must kill the most dangerous addiction of all, the addiction to being liked. Because as long as you need approval, you are owned. So ask yourself, is your kindness really kindness? Or is it just a cage you've learned to decorate? The trap of being liked. From the moment you could walk, you were told to smile for the camera, to say thank you even when you hated the gift, to hug relatives who made your skin crawl because they're family, to be polite, agreeable and small. You were taught that good people don't make others uncomfortable, even if it means betraying themselves. That training didn't stop when you grew up. It just got more sophisticated. In school, you learned that disagreeing with the teacher could make you a problem student. At work, you learned that challenging the boss could get you labeled difficult. In relationships, you learned that expressing your needs could make you selfish. And over time, you didn't just follow these rules, you internalized them. They became invisible. You no longer thought, I should be honest here. You thought, I shouldn't say anything, it'll make things worse. That's how emotional captivity works. It's not chains on your wrists. It's a leash in your mind. The trap of being liked isn't that people won't respect you, it's that they'll respect you less. Because here's the truth. People respect resistance. They value what challenges them. If you've never pushed back, never said no, never risked upsetting someone, you've also never shown them where your lines are. And when people don't see your lines, they don't see your value. You tell yourself it's maturity, that you're keeping the peace. But whose peace is it, really? If keeping the peace means erasing yourself, then that peace belongs to them, not you. And the more you play the agreeable role, the more they expect it. Think about it. The agreeable coworker gets extra work dumped on their desk without being asked. The agreeable friend is the one who drives everyone home at 2 a.m. because you're just so nice. The agreeable partner is the one who apologizes first, even when they did nothing wrong, just to end the fight. And here's the silent danger. The world won't thank you for this. They won't remember it. They won't even see it. Because when you make yourself easy to carry, people stop noticing they're carrying you at all. This is why Machiavelli warned that the man who does not assert himself is quickly forgotten. He understood something most people don't want to hear, that respect isn't built in moments of harmony, it's forged in moments of friction. And the man who avoids all friction becomes invisible. The trap of being liked is that it feels safe until it isn't, because safety without sovereignty isn't safety. It's just a comfortable cage. You might not feel the bars until one day you try to step outside and realize you don't even remember how. The truth: if you're always agreeable, you're not protecting peace. You're protecting their comfort. And comfort is a terrible god to worship. It will demand everything from you: your voice, your presence, your power, and it will give you nothing in return except the illusion that you are loved, when in reality, you're just tolerated. So the question is, when did you decide that being liked was worth more than being real? Because until you answer that, you'll keep playing a role that was never written for the man you were meant to be. The addiction to approval. Approval feels harmless. On the surface, it looks like connection. A smile, a nod, a good job from someone you respect. It's a dopamine hit wrapped in social currency. But the truth is, approval is one of the most addictive substances on the planet, and most men are hooked before they even realize they've taken the first dose. It starts small. You say something in class, the teacher praises you, and suddenly you're chasing that feeling. You clean your room, your parents say they're proud, and you decide you'll do it again. Not because you want a clean room, but because you want that tone in their voice. Every nod of approval becomes a reward, and your nervous system starts wiring itself around one question: do they like me? That's how the approval loop begins. You adjust your behavior, your words, even your personality to keep those little rewards coming. And over time, you're no longer making choices based on what's true for you. You're making choices based on what will keep the room smiling. Here's the cost. The more you seek approval, the more predictable you become. And predictable people are easy to manage. The boss knows you'll take the extra shift. The friend knows you'll pick up the phone at 3 a.m. The partner knows you'll fold in an argument just to keep things calm. You've become a walking yes button, and all they have to do is push it. Worse, approval is a moving target. The moment you get it, it starts slipping away. You're forced to chase the next nod, the next smile, the next validation. It's a treadmill that never stops, and no matter how fast you run, you'll never arrive anywhere permanent. Machiavelli understood this game. He knew that the man who needs approval is a man who can be owned. Why? Because approval is leverage. When someone knows you crave it, they can weaponize it. They can withhold it until you bend. They can give it in just enough doses to keep you addicted. They can shape your decisions without ever raising their voice. This is why so many men find themselves exhausted, but can't explain why. It's not that life is draining them, it's that the approval loop is. They're spending their energy on constant emotional negotiation, trying to keep everyone happy while quietly erasing themselves in the process. Here's the brutal truth. The need for approval isn't a harmless quirk, it's a leash. And the worst part, you're the one holding it. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you pull it tighter. Every time you apologize for something that didn't require an apology, you polish it. Every time you shrink your truth to fit someone else's comfort, you make that leash look like jewelry. Safety without sovereignty isn't safety at all, it's slavery with better lighting. And the man addicted to approval isn't safe from harm. He's just too agreeable for anyone to notice he's bleeding. So if you want to know whether you're free, ask yourself, could you walk away from the people whose approval you crave? Could you disappoint them and still sleep at night? Could you stand in a room where no one smiles at you and still feel whole? If the answer is no, then the leash is still there, and until you drop it, you'll never know what your life feels like when you're truly moving for yourself. Not for the applause. Why nice gets exploited. Here's the truth. No one wants to admit. People don't respect nice. They use it. They stretch it. They drain it until there's nothing left. Because when kindness has no edges, it's not kindness anymore, it's currency. And everyone around you is spending it. Think about it. When was the last time someone said, "Wow, I respect him because he's always agreeable"? They don't. Respect doesn't grow from softness, it grows from resistance, from boundaries, from the quiet friction of someone who will not bend just to keep the room comfortable. And this is why nice guys end up exhausted. Because niceness without limits is an open hallway. Everyone walks through you, they don't pause, they don't notice, they don't stay. They just pass. And you call it virtue. But to them, it's utility. The co-worker who always volunteers. Soon, he's carrying the workload of 3 people, while the office pats him on the back and quietly exploits him. The friend who never says no, eventually he's reduced to a chauffeur, a therapist, a wallet, whatever the group needs, as long as he keeps smiling. The partner who apologizes first, even when she's wrong. Over time, she loses not only his respect, but her own. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He wrote that people are not loyal to what is soft and pliable. They're loyal to what forces them to calculate, what they cannot easily bend, what makes them adjust. That's why he said it's better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Because love rooted in convenience is unstable, but fear, or better yet respect, is grounded in unshakable boundaries. The so-called nice guy doesn't get feared, he doesn't get respected, he gets consumed, because once people realize you'll say yes before you've even thought it through, they stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as a function. A yes machine, a fixer, a quiet absorber of tension. And here's the cruel part. When you finally break, when the weight gets too heavy and you collapse, the same people who drained you will look shocked. What happened? He was always so nice. They won't remember the hundreds of silent concessions. They won't remember the jokes you laughed at that cut too deep, the nights you swallowed your pain to keep them comfortable, the dignity you bled out one apology at a time. They'll just remember the performance, and when it ends, so does their interest. Niceness is not respected because it is predictable. And predictability is vulnerability. When people can map your every reaction, they can manipulate it. They can weaponize silence, knowing you'll break it. They can deploy guilt, knowing you'll cave. They can withhold affection, knowing you'll chase it. They can tighten the leash, because you've already shown them you'll hold it yourself. This is why nice men vanish in rooms where they should be unforgettable. They're present, yes, but their presence has no weight, no edges, no gravity, because people don't value what costs them nothing. And if your kindness doesn't cost others anything, it will never be respected. The brutal truth, you don't lose respect because you're too kind. You lose it because your kindness is for sale, because you give it to everyone, regardless of whether they've earned it. And people don't admire unconditional generosity, they feel entitled to it. So if you've ever wondered why they stop calling, why they stop listening, why they stop showing up, it's because they no longer have to. They've already read the script, they already know the ending. And nothing is more forgettable than a man who's always available. Respect is born in friction, not in ease. If you never push back, they'll never lean in. If you never draw lines, they'll never notice when they've crossed them. And if you never demand more, they'll never give it. That's why niceness, without strength, is not a virtue. It's an open invitation to be forgotten. The power shift from available to sovereign. There comes a moment when you get tired of being predictable, tired of being the easy yes, the safe option, the one everyone calls because they know you'll never say no. And that moment is the turning point, because the second you stop being available by default, you begin the shift from being a convenience to being a present. Most men don't realize how much of their life is spent as background noise. They're always present, always ready, always giving. And because of that, their presence becomes invisible. People stop noticing it. They stop appreciating it. They stop respecting it. Because availability without boundaries doesn't feel like generosity. It feels like furniture. It's there. It's expected. It blends into the room until the day it's gone. But when you pull back, when you stop offering yourself on demand, something strange happens. People start adjusting. They start recalibrating. They pause before they speak. They calculate before they ask. Because suddenly, you've introduced a variable they can't control: uncertainty. Machiavelli knew the power of uncertainty. He understood that predictability breeds weakness, while unpredictability breeds influence. A man who can't be read, who doesn't react the same way twice, who gives only when it serves his mission. That man creates gravity. Others orbit him, not because he demands it, but because they can't risk mustanding him. This is what sovereignty looks like. It's not about being feared in the cartoonish sense, where people cower at your presence. It's about being respected enough that they never assume. They don't know if you'll say yes, so they think twice before asking. They don't know if you'll forgive, so they hesitate before crossing the line. They don't know if your silence means peace or punishment, so they sit with their own discomfort instead of outsourcing it to you. When you move from available to sovereign, you don't chase, you don't explain. You don't bend just to avoid the tension in the room. Instead, you let the room bend around you. You become the axis, the still point, the presence that others must adjust to. And here's the paradox. You don't lose kindness in the process. In fact, your kindness becomes sharper, richer, more valuable. Because now when you give it, people know it isn't default. It isn't cheap. It isn't handed out like candy. It's chosen, selective, earned, and that's what makes it powerful. The sovereign man doesn't stop being kind. He stops being consumed. He stops bleeding for people who never offered him a bandage. He stops performing niceness as a way of buying approval, and starts offering kindness as a deliberate act of strength. This shift terrifies people who were used to your availability. They'll call you cold. They'll call you selfish. They'll say you've changed. But what they're really mourning is the loss of access. They miss the version of you who could be guilted, manipulated, or softened with silence. And when that version dies, they lose the script they depended on. That's when the power dynamic flips. You're no longer the performer, hoping for applause. You're the standard others measure themselves against. You're no longer the predictable echo of their expectations. You're the one forcing them to grow or get left behind. This is the essence of sovereignty. You don't move to be liked. You move with precision. You don't speak to be understood. You speak to be remembered. You don't give to be approved of. You give because it aligns with your clarity. And in that recalibration, you stop being someone's option and become someone's atmosphere. Because availability makes you convenient. Sovereignty makes you unforgettable. Breaking the reward system. Every system has a reward. For the obedient man, the reward is peace, or at least the illusion of it. He smiles when he's hurt, and the room stays calm. He swallows his anger, and the argument ends. He apologizes when he isn't wrong, and everyone moves on. That temporary peace feels like relief until you realize the cost, because every time you give silence instead of truth, every time you trade your standards for applause, you reinforce the same reward system that keeps you small. Think of it like training a dog. The moment it sits when you command, you toss it a treat. Do it enough times, and the dog doesn't sit because it wants to. It sits because it's conditioned to. People do the same thing to you. They reward your obedience with approval, affection, or even just the absence of conflict. And like the dog, you've learned to move, to bend, to shrink on command. The danger: you start to believe that peace is the ultimate prize, that as long as the room isn't tense, you're safe, that as long as no one is upset with you, you're in control. But you're not. You've just mistaken compliance for calm. And calm that requires your silence is not peace, it's captivity. Machiavelli understood this better than most. He wrote not for the agreeable man, but for the calculating one. The one who could tell the difference between a reward and a leash. Because when peace is given as a prize for your silence, you are not being honored, you're being managed. So how do you break it? You stop feeding the system. You stop handing out apologies like tokens. You stop nodding along just to smooth the edges of a conversation. You stop rewarding bad behavior with your quiet tolerance. Because every time you do, you teach people that disrespect will be absorbed, that their comfort matters more than your dignity. Breaking the reward system doesn't mean becoming loud or violent. It doesn't mean turning every disagreement into a battlefield. It means being surgical, still, exact. It means understanding that your silence is not free anymore. Your approval is not automatic. Your presence is not owed. At first, the people around you will panic. They'll accuse you of being cold. They'll call you selfish. They'll say you've changed. And they're right. You have. What they're really mourning isn't your kindness. It's their access. They're grieving the death of the version of you who could be managed with a sigh or a frown. This is where the shift happens. Because once you stop rewarding others for disrespecting you, the balance flips. They start recalibrating. They realize the old tricks don't work anymore. The guilt trips, the silence, the passive aggression. Their levers break, one by one, and the confusion that follows quickly turns into caution. This is the reward system in reverse. You're no longer rewarding compliance with peace. You're rewarding alignment with access. You're no longer handing out your energy for free. You're offering it with discernment, only to those who earn it. And suddenly, your presence has weight again. Because here's the secret Machiavelli knew. People don't just fear the sword. They fear the silence after the sword is sheathed. They fear the pause, the restraint, the unreadable stillness of someone they can no longer predict. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. And clarity is terrifying to those who thrived on your confusion. Breaking the reward system is the moment you stop moving for the treat. You stop bending for the nod. You stop mistaking temporary calm for real peace. And in that moment, you don't just break their control over you. You break your own addiction to being liked. That's the first taste of sovereignty. The strategic use of silence. Most men think power comes from speaking louder, arguing harder, or proving themselves in every room. But true power isn't in noise, it's in silence. Because silence isn't absence, it's presence without performance. It's restraint, so sharp it cuts deeper than words ever could. When you've lived your life addicted to approval, silence feels dangerous. You rush to fill the gap in conversations, to explain yourself, to smooth over the tension. You fear the pause because the pause exposes you. But here's the brutal truth. The pause doesn't expose you. It exposes them. Silence makes people wrestle with their own thoughts. It forces them to question themselves in the void you refuse to fill. Machiavelli understood this. He wrote that rulers should never be too easily, because the moment your intentions are predictable, your enemies, and even your allies can manage you. That's not leadership. That's performance. Silence, on the other hand, creates mystery. And mystery creates gravity. Think of the last time someone you cared about went silent, not ghosted you, not abandoned you, just fell quiet in the middle of a conversation.
Did your mind rest? Or did it race? Did you start replaying your own words, wondering if you said too much? Did you feel unsettled because you couldn't decode what that silence meant? That's the power you've been giving away by over-explaining, by justifying, by filling the space with apologies that no one asked for, but everyone expected. Strategic silence doesn't mean retreat. It means precision. It's choosing not to hand over your blueprint, because every explanation you give is a key. Every justification is a map. And once people have the map, they can navigate you. They know how to push, where to press, what tone to use to make you fold. Silence takes the map away. It confuses them. It unsettles them, and eventually it forces them to respect you. Not because you threatened them, but because you didn't explain, didn't move just to calm their storm. Silence tells them, if you want access, you have to rise to meet me. I will not lower myself so you can understand me on your terms. This is why Machiavelli believed unpredictability was a form of power. Silence is the ultimate unpredictability. When you stop feeding people the reactions they rely on, they start second-guessing themselves. They rehearse their words before speaking. They hesitate before crossing the line. They respect not just your voice, but the possibility of its absence. And here's the paradox. Silence doesn't make you smaller. It makes you larger. It stretches your presence across the room. It lingers in their mind long after you've left. They replay your stillness more than they ever replayed your words. Because silence leaves space. And people fill space with fear, projection and self-doubt. The strategic use of silence isn't passive. It's surgical. It separates the worthy from the opportunistic. It filters who can sit with tension from who needs constant reassurance. And it makes clear that your energy is not free anymore. Because when you stop performing, you stop being predictable. And when you stop being predictable, you stop being controlled. That is the moment you shift from being an option to being a presence. It doesn't come from smiling at the right times or from being endlessly available. Respect comes from weight, from the gravity of your presence. When you stop negotiating your worth and start radiating it. Most men confuse being liked with being valued. They think that if everyone is comfortable around them, they'll be remembered. But the truth is the opposite. The more comfortable you make everyone else, the easier it is for them to forget you. Because comfort doesn't demand awareness. Comfort doesn't create memory. What creates memory? What creates respect is impact. And impact is born from friction, edges, and scarcity. When you step back from being endlessly available, your absence starts speaking louder than your presence ever did. They notice when you don't answer right away. They notice when you no longer bend to smooth their discomfort. They notice the pause before you respond, the stillness in your silence, the weight in your words. You've stopped being background noise. You've become atmosphere. Machiavelli understood this shift. He knew that power was never in begging for loyalty, but in making people calibrate themselves around you. A prince, he said, should be feared rather than loved, if he must choose. But beneath that is a deeper principle. Stability. A man who doesn't flinch, who doesn't explain, who doesn't chase, becomes stable in a world addicted to noise and chaos. And stability is magnetic. People lean toward it, even when they don't understand why. Respect isn't demanded. It's cultivated. It grows in the pauses you refuse to break. It deepens in the boundaries you refuse to lower. It solidifies when you walk away without guilt, and others realize your absence is a verdict in itself. Respect is born when your kindness is no longer free, When your approval must be earned. When your energy has a gate instead of a revolving door. And here's the paradox. When you stop trying to be liked, you become harder to forget. Because likability is everywhere. Everyone's performing for it. But presence, true presence, that's rare. Scarcity creates value. And nothing is more scarce than a man who no longer needs anything from the room he walks into. People start to prepare differently. When they know your approval isn't guaranteed, they double-check their tone before speaking. They replay the last conversation in their mind, searching for clues. They hesitate before making requests, because they know access isn't automatic anymore. That hesitation, that recalibration, is respect in action. You're no longer the man who adjusts to everyone else. You're the one they adjust to. You've shifted from being the predictable nice guy to being a force they measure themselves against. And the beauty of this shift is that it doesn't require shouting or fighting or proving. It only requires discipline. Discipline to stop explaining. Discipline to stop apologizing for your boundaries. Discipline to let silence do the work for you. This is the transformation. From available to sovereign. From background to atmosphere. From liked to respected. And the deeper truth is this. You were never here to be liked by everyone. You were here to become unforgettable to the right ones. Because when you carry yourself with clarity, when you move with weight, when you let scarcity sharpen your presence, you stop being an option and start being the standard. And that's when respect stops being something you chase and becomes something they can't help but give. From liked to untouchable. So here's the final truth. Being liked is a trap. It flatters you. It soothes you. It makes you feel safe. But it robs you of the very thing that makes you alive. Because the more you chase likability, the more you bend. The more you bend, the more you break. And one day, you look in the mirror and realize the person being applauded isn't you. It's a watered-down version of you, trained to disappear. Respect works differently. Respect doesn't come from performance. It doesn't come from over-explaining or apologizing until your voice runs dry. Respect comes from what you refuse to negotiate. It comes from the line you will not cross, even if it costs you connection. It comes from the silence you hold when they demand a reaction, and you give them nothing. It comes from the moment you decide that self-betrayal is no longer an option, no matter how much approval it costs. Machiavelli knew this centuries ago. He understood that a man who depends on love alone is weak. Because love is fickle. People love what entertains them. They love what comforts them. But respect is different. Respect is carved into memory. It lingers even in your absence. It makes people adjust their tone, their words, their choices, simply because you might be watching or even because you might not. That is the difference between being liked and being untouchable. Liked people are convenient. Untouchable people are remembered. Liked people are taken for granted. Untouchable people are measured against. Liked people fade into the background once the performance ends. Untouchable people live rent-free in the minds of others long after they leave the room. And here's the part most men never understand. You don't have to choose cruelty to escape the trap of being liked. You don't have to become bitter, cold, or arrogant. You simply have to become clear. Clear on your boundaries. Clear on your worth. Clear on the fact that your life is not a stage built for the comfort of others. When you stop chasing approval, something strange happens. The same people who once ignored your boundaries start treading carefully. The same voices that once silenced you start stumbling in their own noise. The same faces that once saw you as predictable Start second guessing every move you make. Not because you yelled, not because you fought, but because you stopped playing. That's sovereignty. That's the moment you stop being liked and start being respected. That's the shift from noise to presence, from option to access, from predictable to untouchable. So the question isn't whether people like you. The question is whether you still respect yourself after every interaction. Because when you build a life on that question, you no longer need applause to breathe. You no longer need approval to exist. You walk into every room, not as a man begging for inclusion, but as a presence that bends the atmosphere. And when people whisper about you, when they say you've changed, when they call you cold, when they accuse you of building walls, let them. Their words are not insults. They're confessions. Confessions that you've become someone they can no longer control. Confessions that their access has expired. Confessions that you've risen above the trap of being liked and into the realm of being respected. Liked people live in memory. For a moment. Untouchable people live there forever. So stop asking, do they like me? And start asking, do I still respect myself after this? Because the moment you choose respect over approval, you stop being just another agreeable voice in the crowd. You become the silence that changes the room. And that silence, that's not absence. That's authority.